Hey everyone, I'm Alex from AODocs. Thank you for tuning in to today's webinar, The Future of Knowledge Management in the Cloud. Now today we've got a special opportunity to sit down with Ron Goodwin from Google. Ron is a part of the Google Data Center team. This is the team that manages all of the physical infrastructure, the data centers that power all of Google's main products like Gmail, Google Drive, and different product offerings offered by the Google Cloud services. Let's take a listen. I think you're really going to like it.
Ron, thanks for joining us here today. Could you introduce yourself, give us a little bit about your background, and tell us what brought you to Google?
Sure, thanks Dennis. My name is Ron Goodwin. I'm from Google Data Centers. I'm a program manager for knowledge management for the data centers, and really great to be here. I appreciate you guys having me here to chat about all the benefits that we've been seeing from AODocs. A little bit about my background. I have a varied background. But all of it has the consistency of looking at information being organized, which is kind of interesting. Over the years, I really didn't anticipate that to be the case, but worked in CAD for 6-7 years. It's kind of interesting there. One of the ones that stands out for me is they used to have the early version of cloud. So I was actually locked in a vault, big heavy door, closed, locked me in, and I would work on classified programs in a vault. So IP security and the cloud way back then, but it wasn't called that then. Went from there to heavy manufacturing, so you could think about it going from design and engineering into design execution, which is where I'm at today in Google. Heavy manufacturing was doing huge, set up a technology center for the company, so actually doing non-contact inspection of huge tools. So was working on shaped reflectors. You might think of satellites as being this nice elliptical thing. No, they're shaped in order to handle what's going on the ground as far as where they're putting signal. So worked on all kinds of large tooling there. A lot of Fortune 100 companies, but also I started a startup. So it was in the hospitality industry. It was kind of interesting. Again, needed the right information. We were really leveraging what the folks using the information on, which was called a fun pad at the time, but was really looking at harvesting the information, having it secure. We were at large retail restaurants, and so we really needed the security of IP and the organization of information. So all throughout my career, it always has been about information organization, and I noticed a consistency in needing the clear organization of information in order to even do the job of the company. And so that kind of led me down the path of knowledge management and really being able to put knowledge together to see the profitability of the organization and the quality of the information to exercise what the company was wanting to do. Went from there to the utility industry, which is the first place I did formal knowledge management. Was with Microsoft products at that time, so was working with a different suite than I am today with AODocs, but was able to set up an environment there where we had developers and things that we'll talk about today that we do at Google in order to get knowledge to work in tandem with what we're doing with AODocs. But now in data centers, I think the big benefit or difference here is scale. When you're talking about Google, you're talking about things that are at a significant scale. So that really differentiates it from what I've done in other scenarios in my background. But that's kind of my background.
Great, no, thank you for that. What are some of the challenges that you're facing at Google when you try to innovate?
I'll look at what is consistent across all businesses. Google, like all of the other companies that I've worked at, they have the challenge of culture, standardization of information, continual change. Information is always either growing or changing. The unique things at Google really are, as I mentioned, scale. I'm talking about millions of documents now, not hundreds or hundreds of thousands. It's always interesting to have a conversation with somebody about their IP, and they say, oh yeah, we've got 1,000. Oh, well, I've got 10 million in a repository. So scale is an interesting enabler, not only a hindrance, it's an enabler as well. And then the other one really emphasized at Google is IP security. Having the right information at the right places, the right time for the right people, but only the right people. So a challenge that we have with AODocs or any software that we're working with is making sure that our information is secure.
How important is process management to Google data centers?
It's a core element for what we do, process management. It's a baseline for us to eliminate human error. I'm looking at process management, or I look at it as programmatic process management, that I can apply something to be consistently executed in Google. It's critical and a baseline for us. We use functionality of document type and all kinds of functionality that's inside of AODocs, but really it's about, can I get consistency out there, which kind of goes against our culture. Our culture is let you decide your journey and how you're going to execute, how you're accomplishing your tasks at Google. That isn't always conducive when you're talking about knowledge management, where I need structure and standardization and consistency, either for BI, business information, or getting the right information there and having the right version number. I'm leveraging what's there, but I'm trying to eliminate that human error all the time. And process management allows me to do that so that I do get the right information to a site. You can imagine I've got a multi-million-dollar, billion-dollar data center program, and I deliver even a couple of wrong documents to an architectural engineering firm. They will design and localize for the wrong environment. They had the wrong version. The way we used to do it, that was happening. So it's a significant cost impact. It's a potential quality issue if I don't have a consistent programmatic approach to business process.
So let's get more into how you're using AODocs, and can you give us some examples of the processes that you're implementing with our tool?
Yeah, AODocs is used for, really it's a database repository of information. So there is housing of information, collating of information, dissemination of information. We use it for audit. I need to know where every file has gone worldwide. So I work in all the global regions. We're using AODocs to make sure that I can audit things in seconds. I have no real allowance or to have something take a long time. My users are always expecting immediate response, and AODocs gives me that information to do that. And change, something new that we're implementing, maybe we can talk about a little later, is getting engineering bulletins out there about change, and that's something we're leveraging the fact that I have it in AODocs. It's a centralized, consistent solution that I can use to take a look at that. So there's a lot of examples of where we're using, I'll hone in maybe on dissemination. Dissemination is something we'll maybe talk about a little bit later more, but it allows me to take hundreds of thousands of documents and collate them into the right set of documents for any individual project.
So you're pushing these documents to the right person almost in real time, right? That's what you said?
In real time, yeah. It's, and it's critical that I have the ability to select which documents apply based on a configuration element. So I could put a cooling unit at a location, and I need to know, okay, when I'm talking about the cooling, what are the variables that make up the configuration for that location? We use the power of AODocs, and really it's the metadata inside of AODocs that allows me to do that configuration on the fly. I even build documents on the fly inside of AODocs based on the metadata. One of the huge strengths for us is the metadata as a baseline element for everything that we need to do as far as automation. So it's a database location, but it's also allowing me to do that dissemination. Those same meta values allow me to do audit in seconds. You know, I have folks come to us all the time, someone on the team, and say, I need to know where this file was used. It's a safety issue. I need to know where this file was used around the globe. And in seconds, we can tell them that based on AODocs metadata.
So you push the documents everywhere, you have an audit trail that makes everything traceable, and you organize with structure to make sure that the right people have access to the right information.
Correct.
And how were you doing this before AODocs?
That's an interesting story. It was done manually, like a lot of companies I think would do today if they didn't have AODocs. You know, the taxonomy, the folder structure was built manually. That was inconsistent because it was manual, human error. They were placing the files manually in there, so that means they had to go around and talk to all the different people that were generating information. Were they getting the right information? Oh, is that the latest version? Are you supposed to be the one that gives me that? Was it approved correctly? So it was taking weeks to collect a single plan of record for doing a data center. We have today 14 plans of record. You can imagine trying to do that manually. If you take 3 weeks, an example here would be just our latest plan of record that we disseminate. We've done 1,600 disseminations. So if you had 1,600 disseminations and you think about it taking multiple weeks.
Each dissemination is sending new versions to your engineers?
Potentially.
Yeah.
That's something else we need, is a dynamic tracking of what's happening in change. So change management is part of what we're doing, which comes back to how I'm using process management. The process management is what allows me to release the files. The release of a file, published file in AODocs, is immediately picked up on any future dissemination to guarantee I'm not going to give the wrong version downstream. So, yeah.
So it gives you protection against human errors, but it gives you also speed, right? You went from weeks to
Yeah, and the weeks alone, you're looking at the numbers that I just talked about, you're at 10 million plus savings just in the 1,600 that I mentioned. So a significant savings, and that's not talking about quality, that's not talking about speed of dissemination, accuracy. You know, it takes me a few seconds to do it, it's great, and that is that multi-million-dollar savings. But just the churn and consistency, we work with multiple vendors, so I have to be able to consistently give the right information to the right people.
The vendors are the companies building the data centers, is that right?
It goes downstream to what's called GCs, general contractors, yes. But
Okay.
you know, we start out with going to, so you can see the variety of vendors that I'm dealing with, and it's essential that we have a consistent set of information being
And
disseminated.
how many documents are we talking about? You mentioned millions earlier.
A single plan of record is roughly 6,000 documents for a single project. So if you were to come in and say, I want to do a new data center from brand new, it's 6,000 documents for a single dissemination. Then you've got the potential for change. So we call them engineering bulletins. You're on an engineering bulletin that could come. That needs to go consistently to the right people, needs to have engineering process again, so that I get the approval across the teams and then disseminate it into the location so that the design execution manager can say, yeah, I want that to go into my program.
And tell us again, what are the consequences if one of those bulletins is sent to the wrong people, or if there's a mistake in those processes?
That's interesting. A hard example here would be engineering bulletin has just been brought, change has just been brought into AODocs, and we're just releasing new AODocs functionality to do it. There was a scenario where the information wasn't disseminated, and we had an outage. So, you know, there was a portion of a data center that was not functional because the engineering information for change didn't get to the location. So you potentially can have a shutdown based on the wrong information or not getting the information.
Oh, that's pretty bad.
That's huge. Yeah.
But it's really interesting because it's not obvious the link between a wrong document, how a wrong document can result in a data center being shut down. I mean, it's almost counterintuitive.
It's an interesting challenge with individuals because they're used to choosing their own path. And so they're saying, well, what's the big deal? It's a single document. It's not a big, I've got it, I know. Whereas if you have engineering process in a system like AODocs where you're sure that the right information got to the right place based on programmatic logic rather than arbitrary assignment, which is something that we fight, that if we're going to have rules, that it's not something where someone can arbitrarily apply it. Systematic approach to this is what allows me to have the structure that Google isn't necessarily always happy with. We like the flexibility of everybody to do their own thing, but if I systematize it and make it to where it's so powerful and beneficial in eliminating requirements on me as an individual, much more likely to adopt and want to utilize that.
And so what are the features of AODocs that are the most impactful for these processes?
I think one that's probably pretty easy to see is that it's built on G Suite. That is a basis. I'm a firm believer that the information should be worked on in its native environment, if at all possible. So we do have all types. The MIME types in AODocs allow us to be very flexible. I can have a model, I can have a PDF, I can have a Revit file, so I can be very flexible. But being built on G Suite, I can author in an environment that I don't have to change anything. So when my users generate documents, there's no change. They're working in G Suite. On top of that, you know, some of the benefits are a comprehensive metadata set. I did mention that earlier, that is a core to all of our automation. So I can't do that in even a native environment. The metadata is not there. So having that, auto versioning, you know, is critical to us to make sure that we're getting the right information. We've overlaid some automation on top of that to make sure that I can use Google Cloud search and be able to get the information really fast, and it leverages some of that as well. Simple workflow creation is something that's really key. We have ever-growing workflows that we're adding on top. We started just with one engineering approval capability, but we're continuing to enhance that. It's an interesting change in Google is that more and more groups are coming to us asking for, hey, I want to use AODocs. And what they're seeing is that consistency of an engineering process, and they see how easy it is to work with. You know, I've got hundreds of thousands of just canonical definition for data centers.
And you've been able to build this step by step, right? You mentioned starting with a simple workflow and then increasing progressively.
It is beautiful that that's the case, that you can work with something and grow that. That's something that AODocs has been great. The team has worked with us to go from where we were reactive, that's where we started and it was a simple workflow, to now where we're proactive. And AODocs has, you know, added additional, we have UI experts from AODocs, we have process building, we have support folks from AODocs. So we have really grown in how we collaborate with AODocs as well. So it's given us a lot of potential to leverage what the capabilities are.
Ron, Google has some of the world's biggest data centers, technology, sophisticated data centers. Your team is at Google Data Centers. What does your team do at Google Data Centers? Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
We float around in the clouds. No, it's a physical data center. They're all over the globe, a lot of locations. My team is a global team, so knowledge management is looking at all of the locations around the world, which there's configuration differences, right, between whether it's in APAC and in Asia, whether it's in Europe, or whether it's in the States or Canada or wherever they might be. So, part of our responsibility is to facilitate easy customization for those global regions. And, our part is to take information from engineering and get it to the execution team. I'm part of the design execution team. And that being putting together the right information, the right configuration of information, and get it to the engineering firms that we work with, and work between the design execution team and the engineering teams. We do get some impact downstream. So when you're talking about general contractors and operations folks, we interface with that. At this point, we're just starting to work with getting the documentation back from other teams once it's going to the actual operation function of a data center. But that information throughout, you are talking about for an individual new project, 6,000 documents. The dissemination of information into a work project area over the past 6 years is exceeding 10 million documents at this point that we manage as far as projects. So a couple 100,000 in a canonical definition of what the baseline is, and different variations of that. Inside of a canonical definition, there are different elements that make up a data center that we help to control, make sure that it's allowing configuration of those elements to meet the plan of record that's going out, and then getting the information to the architectural engineering firms and making sure that it goes downstream. More and more BI, more and more business intelligence to say, can you tell me what the state of that is? Where are they at? Where are they at in the process? What is the health of the documentation? We have a dashboard for that based on the information in AODocs. So that's something that executive management wants to know, downstream teams want to know. When am I going to be able to get this information to start this project? So,
is it, as the data centers expand and revise really their designs, you're controlling that type of information that's going out from a design perspective?
Yeah, engineering group is giving us information on the different products that go into a data center. So we have those versions that are changing through the process, and we need to be able to capture the information from engineering, organize it, know that the latest and greatest is going out. More and more, we have to go faster and faster. The demand of industry requires that we are able to accomplish this in shorter and shorter time frames. The organization of information and ease and communication of the original and the changes is essential. That's part of the business process power, is that I'm doing this in a consistent fashion where I can do it quickly.
How many people are impacted? Like, how many users are at Google that use AODocs or leveraging AODocs for this purpose? For
our area, we have roughly 3,000 users that are interfacing with the information that we have in the repository that we're working in. So a fair amount of users that we have to really look at what are all their business use cases and how they're leveraging the information, and making sure that we can organize that in a fashion where everyone knows where their information is. When it gets downstream to an AE, to an architectural engineering firm, you're outside of the Google environment. Is it organized in a fashion that they can understand and get to the information easily? So I'm talking about 3,000 Google users, and then there's users beyond that at the AE, at the GC, there's operations folks downstream. So there's a fair amount of folks that are impacted.
All right, so you told us a lot about the risk we mitigate with AODocs and the different processes and so on, but can you quantify a bit the ROI that those processes bring to Google?
Yeah, quality, there's a few things to look at here. I mean, we've talked quite a bit about eliminating human error and having that. And when you look at eliminating human error, I can reflect back to originally where we were getting the wrong versioning. So having the right version out there is important. We've grown into some of the other things that I talked about as far as collation of information. Originally, we didn't have the automation laid on top of AODocs. We were just saying, can I organize it correctly? So if you combine versioning of information being correct, if you combine that with the collation of information, being correct. Now you start looking at what is my time to use. And time to use is critical to us. I mentioned
time to use is the time between what and what?
Time between when engineering gives me the information and when I can actually utilize it on a project.
Okay.
So that delta, there are several challenges in there. If I have it in a centralized system, then I need to organize it so that I can access it in the correct orientation, configuration. If I have it outside of AODocs, then I'm having to go around to all kinds of personal drives or shared drives or all kinds of locations and correct it. And AODocs gives me a return on investment just at the outset of saying it's in a single location where I don't have to search around for it and know, one, do I have the right information? Two, if the right people approved the information. Quality of information has a lot of facets, right?
So it's earlier you were mentioning that it would take weeks to find the right information before AODocs, and now it takes, what, hours, minutes?
Correct. It was weeks before, and then we weren't sure of the quality. Now it takes minutes, whatever it takes for a person to go through. And it depends on what they're trying to get. If I just want a standard dissemination, seconds. It's literally saying, I want this global region, I want this plan of record, I want this set of models. You're done, you push a button. It creates the taxonomy for you in the project work area. It goes and checks and makes sure, is there an existing global site where this is supposed to go? Is there an existing project in that global site area? Yes, there is. Okay, I'll create the taxonomy inside of there, all based on what's in AODocs. I'll bring that into the environment with the project. The design execution project manager can work with it. That's all being done automatically in seconds. So you're sure it's the right taxonomy every time. You're sure it's the right files every time. Right there, return on investment of millions of dollars. If I had to do those 1,600 I mentioned a little bit earlier, it would have, well, one, we couldn't scale. So we couldn't accomplish what we need to do today without this kind of automation. And it really comes back to the metadata in AODocs. Is without that metadata in AODocs, I couldn't do what I'm doing today. So being able to do it is one thing, but then seeing the return on investment of not weeks, so I've got time so I can actually scale to go to market, which is critical for what we're doing.
So it's risk reduction, it's speeding up the weeks becoming minutes on the, I guess this directly impacts the construction planning of those data centers, and scaling up, like being able to produce more data centers, more projects in parallel. Is that correct?
Yep, that along with quality of information, making sure that if there is change, that I can get that information into the pipe and to the right individuals as well. So churn in of itself, whether it's with vendors or internally, can be very counterproductive to what we're trying to do, that they just don't trust the information. We had that where vendors were using old copies because they had it. I don't want to wait weeks for that. I'm just going to use it's close enough. I know this info.
Close enough, but not correct.
And that's thousands of dollars because it was close enough. So, time to use is a critical element, and how long it takes me to get the information there. But just to generate it is a huge savings.
All right. And let's go back to how our teams work together. So you and I have known each other for years. Our teams have worked together for years. So tell us a bit how this relationship has worked for you.
I did mention a little bit earlier in one of the questions about being reactive and proactive. And really that's a knowledge management paradigm as well. If you look at knowledge management in how you understand the information, it really goes from document management to information management to knowledge management. So AODocs has progressed with us in the same fashion. We had, I would say, daily meetings when we started out. We were meeting with the team.
I remember that.
Because there was a lot of bleed, and we really didn't know what was going on, so we were meeting with you guys. And you were great. The team was great and working with us in a reactive fashion. We've progressed towards true knowledge management, where we're now starting to look at tacit information. What's between the ears of Googlers, and how can we help them to take some non-value add things off their plate and get to things that are true value add. Quality is one. I'm always saying I can't automate quality. I can get things that are repetitive into a consistent operational capability and do it. And AODocs has helped with that. They've added additional resources. We've gone from folks to just help us with the reactive to now we work with UI experts, we work with data scientists, we work with engineers on future products. So we've gone more and more towards working with your team in being proactive and really anticipating what the needs of Google information are going to be.
And how do you see the future uses of AODocs at Google projecting a bit in the future?
You know, for us, we're looking at always ease of use. I'm looking at, can I find information faster? And then you're starting to talk about ML or AI, or, you know, I'm really looking at association rather than doing an explicit search using specific search terms. I want to do inferred relationships. So you're talking about a semantic. I really go back to thinking about natural language. And I think our collaboration with AODocs to get towards a natural language interpretation, everything's voice driven now, right? You know, more and more voice. So I need natural language interpretation. An example would be, let's say I'm in Asia, I'm in Europe, I'm someplace, and it's, I'm thinking about the time difference, so they're not going to be able to get a hold of my team. Can they just say, I need a manual for a generator, and the inferred semantic logic there, one understands what I'm asking for, it's natural language, but also knows, okay, I know what region you're at on the globe, I know what your role is, I know when you say generator, you're talking about this site. So I see us going more and more together towards that kind of, and that works in any industry, right? It's not just a Google need, it could be, you know, a medical division, all kinds of divisions in Google and beyond. I look forward to collaborating more with you guys on that kind of technology.
All right, cool. All right. So Ron, thanks again for joining us today. I asked you a lot of questions, but is there any final thoughts you want to share with us?
You know, I think one that is really top of mind for me recently, a couple days ago, Sundar made a comment about how we can contribute more. And I think AODocs plays into what Sundar asked, because Sundar's question was, or statement was, you know, your job is what you can do to do your job better, improving what we're doing. And I really see AODocs as allowing us the business process automation and things for all of us, not just my team, but for all of us to do our job better, and to really look at how can we optimize how we're working on Google data to do things faster, better, and stronger. So.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
So thank you for joining us. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to us, and we'll be happy to answer and to tell you more. Thank you.